Every Big 12 fan base has turned on BYU, except they kind of haven't. This is a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Cougars crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Cougars crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. And a show you're probably keeping in that rotation is Locked On Cougars. Jake Hatch joins the show today. And Jake, look, if we start here on the topic of everyone hating BYU, we can go to Oklahoma State, we can go to Baylor, we can go to Utah, we can go pretty much anywhere you want to go, and someone's going to accuse BYU of poaching their players or tampering. That's the big word. It's been the biggest storyline of the last couple of weeks, so we're touching on it again, and now we get to hear from the guy who covers BYU, and I get all the time, I get like he only talks about BYU. This is like the fourth time Jake's been on the show in the last year. JT Wister still calls and wants to be on the show once a week. And Jake, just now, we set this up once every blue moon, and finally we get to hear from a real source on it. We'll start there. We'll also go AJ DeBonsa to what Arizona's doing in the portal, to what Kansas is doing to rebuild, and Baylor as well. Big 12 basketball is having an incredible offseason. And a lot of folks, Utah fans, are unhappy that BYU's church affiliation is mixed with BYU also having an NIL fund. Two separate things, but for some reason, they believe you are a school of faith. You can't pay your players. Is that true? What's going on? If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Jake, tampering, Oklahoma State, Colorado, Utah, UCF. I don't know. Is BYU just trying to take every Big 12 player at this point? Because it feels like multiple fan bases are accusing the Cougars of that.
They might as well at this point, because if everybody's going to hate them like they are, might as well just start stealing everybody's players. Let's make a super team and call Provo, Utah home. Why not?
It seems like that is what Kalani Sitake is doing. Evil, terrible dictator Kalani Sitake, who is coming to steal your favorite player, Rocco Beck, Sam Levitt, Jordan Tyson, consider themselves BYU Cougars. No, I want to ask a different question, actually, because I want to know from the rip. I said that most fan bases are turning against BYU or hating BYU, but it also feels like after a week goes by, Oklahoma State fans, Baylor fans, reasonable people are like, yeah, we just kind of got outbid, and that's what college football is today. I don't think BYU is necessarily getting hate or becoming an ultimate rival for Big 12 schools. People understand this is business.
Well, and that's the thing. I said it on Locked On Cougars that if this is the mark of making it in college football and in the Big 12, BYU's made it, Drake. They have become persona non grata, to use that expression. And these fan bases out there, yeah, they may be upset with BYU plucking away a player or two, but simply put, BYU's just doing what everybody else is doing. It just so happens BYU's doing it at a better and a higher level than the other programs who are complaining about it.
This has become an arms race. The arms are money. NIL. What do you have? What can you give me? And at some point, Jake, I think BYU fans have to stop deflecting. This is maybe the only note that I would give. You see them on Twitter be like, oh, we're not tampering, or we're you even hear donors say we'll never be the biggest offer. We're gonna love you to the point where you can. When will the entirety of BYU Nation accept the fact, hey, we have deep pockets, we're going to utilize those, and it's not a crime to be a school that threatens other Big 12 programs?
The crazy thing about this, Drake, is I think it's the vocal minority of BYU fans, and the person you referred to that we're not going to be the highest bidder. That's the church education commissioner, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
He runs all the universities for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he can have that opinion. But in practice, BYU is doing the exact opposite. They have had boosters tell Myron Medcalf from ESPN, we will not be outbid. That's the direct quote that was given to Myron Medcalf. BYU is in it to win it. And we had Tom Homo, who is going to retire here in the relatively near future, on my radio station here in Salt Lake City. He said, the quote he uses, BYU is in the game. And the way to be in the game, Drake, is to have money and have money to spend. And that's exactly what BYU is utilizing. And so far, so good, because they're getting a lot of talent as a result.
Yeah, don't hate the player, hate the game. That's what this kind of feels like. If UCF had the capital, if Cincinnati had the capital to do what BYU is doing, they would certainly do that. There's not some moral compass today in college football that says we need you to suck to prove that you're a good guy. That's not, that's something that Vanderbilt has invested in for years. We need you to suck to prove we're really good at education. BYU doesn't have to be bad just to prove they're still a faith-based institution, to prove they're not a villain for the rest of the Big 12. I'm going to turn this around to the rivalry because the Holy War is so huge. Do you think that Utah is still the more scorned, hated, disliked Big 12 program than BYU, even though BYU is the school actually beating Big 12 teams?
I think the BYU right now may have overtaken the Utes in that respect, but here's the deal. I still think that there are certain fan bases out there who look at the way that Utah fans interact with other Big 12 fan bases and still have just a poor they have a poor reputation. That's just a simple fact of life when it comes to Utah, is they have a lot of fans who like to say a lot of stuff that seems to irk a lot of different people out there on social media and the like. So I think BYU, the fact that they're, as you mentioned, they're in the game and they're winning the game, that's what drives people batty, because BYU is supposed to be, in their minds, this pious institution that is supposed to be standing by its principles and its morals and its moral compass, as you referred to. But the simple fact of life is BYU wants to win. They want to win at a high level. There's a reason why they're in the Big 12 conference, because they want to have a chance to win a national title again. And that's exactly what they're chasing.
I want you to be honest here. There's no reason to sugarcoat the answer. If I'm a TCU fan, if I'm a Kansas State or Houston fan, should I be worried that my favorite player will eventually be a BYU Cougar?
Yeah, it should. Absolutely. Because here's the deal. We're watching the SEC. We're watching the Big Ten. We're watching the ACC. They're all plucking talent off one another's rosters. Well, in the Big 12, it seems like there's two big programs right now who have money and cash that is going to make them a player. It's Texas Tech and it's BYU.
No doubt. Texas Tech is squarely in this conversation as well. And I don't know if they are if they're acquiring other Big 12 players at as high of a rate, but they also don't have a Utah in their back pocket like BYU does, with so many players that you recruited in the same way. Right? It's a lot different to recruit a kid. If you're a coach in Lubbock recruiting a kid from Houston, that's a whole lot different than a coach in Houston recruiting a kid from Houston. If you're talking Salt Lake, Provo, I know fans of both fan bases don't love to hear it, but it's pretty close. A lot of those players are in the same conversations with other 17, 18-year-old kids about where are we going to go. And those conversations are dominated by the Utah coaching staff, the BYU coaching staff. Coming up, good coaching staffs, good NIL, that stuff carries over to basketball too. But it's the whole Big 12 having an insane offseason. This is a Locked On Big 12. Locked On Cougars crossover. Today's show is brought to you by GameTime. Why is it brought to you by GameTime? Because the NBA playoffs are here. And with the NBA playoffs here, GameTime is my opportunity to get cheap, affordable tickets to see the most electric atmosphere that you can pick up in the month of May. I went last year, Oklahoma City, saw the Thunder play the Mavericks, RIP Mavs. And as tip-off gets closer, this is what I did, prices go down. Last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. So the all-in pricing as well means that there are no surprise fees at checkouts. Check out what you see, what you get. Go to GameTime. Download the app. Locked On College is your code for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices. That is guaranteed. That's Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. He talks all things BYU. Let's go conference-centric here, though. ESPN's way too early top 25 is out for college basketball. Now, I know we're way ahead of ourselves, but the Big 12 is there. I've seen CBS, On3, ESPN, all kind of releasing their way too earlys. Houston, top 5. BYU, top 5. Texas Tech, consensus top 10. Arizona, Iowa State, both top 15. I've seen Kansas up there, Baylor up there. The Big 12 is dominating, and the reason you get to open the conversation is you have the, still in my book, number one player in the country in A.J. Devonsa, a slew of transfers, and Richie Saunders back. I don't know if you can start the Big 12 basketball offseason conversation without first looking at Provo.
I would agree, Drake. Here's the thing. BYU, the stakes have been raised to just, let's say, an insane level for Provo, Utah. We've got guys like John Rothstein out here saying that the floor or the expectation for BYU is a Final Four run this year. Might I remind everybody out there, BYU has made 30-plus NCAA tournament appearances and has still not appeared in a Final Four, Drake. So if they accomplish what this team has set before it, it's going to be absolutely historic. And the excitement level, it's palpable here in Provo, but they've got to match it when it comes to actually taking the court in November.
Do you have a finger on the pulse for a Houston, for a Kansas, as a BYU fan, because I know you're a journalist, but in some categories, a fan first when it comes to hoping that BYU does ultimately win. Do you look around the Big 12 and say, man, as good as BYU looks, I've got an eye on schools like Houston that are locked and reloaded?
Yeah, here's the thing. BYU has gotten absolutely demolished the last 2 years when they faced Houston. Houston is just absolutely dominant. And yeah, you have to slay that dragon. But then you also mentioned the Texas Techs of the world, the Arizonas, the Iowa States. Hey, Kansas, they got this kid named Darren Peterson, who in some circles is the best recruit outside of AJ DeBonsa. Yeah. So there is going to be an absolute gauntlet to be run this year. Now, they are downgrading the conference schedule from 20 to 18 games. So that is a miniature break in a way to not have 2 extra conference games, Drake. But yes, you may think that BYU's upgraded. Everybody else around them upgraded as well. And that's the tough part for a BYU fan, I think, to stomach, is that, hey, we may have our best team quite literally we've ever had. And simply put, we may not be the best team in our league.
Arizona basketball made some wild headlines over the course of the last week as their non-conference schedule begins to matriculate Auburn, Alabama, UConn, Florida, UCLA. Arizona said, look, drop us from 20 to 18 in Big 12 play. We're going to go play the best in the country. Do you like that format, or are you biting off more than you can chew, especially with these Big 12 schools mostly having 2, 3, 4, 5 new contributors?
Well, that's the thing about it is Arizona's doing it. BYU's doing the exact same thing, Drake. We are seeing them. They're going to be playing Clemson in Madison Square Garden. They're going to go to Orlando for an MTE event. They're going to be playing potentially in Boston, according to reports, against some team of some report out there, because they want to get AJ DeBonsa home to Boston to play in front of his hometown crowd. BYU is planning on beefing up their non-conference slate as bad, as big, and as tough as it can be, much like Arizona. And I have question marks if that is the right way to go about it, because it could wear you out by the time conference play comes around. But on the flip side, BYU had an absolute cupcake schedule this past year in Kevin Young's first year, and it took them 6-8 games in conference play to really find their bearings. So maybe this is the right thing to do, to go and test yourself against the nation's best and then hit the Big 12 ground running.
Yeah, honestly, Arizona was there last year. They really stunk it up in non-conference, and we thought, I think they were 5-6 maybe to start the year. We thought, oh, they're down and out. Next thing you know, they're right there toe-to-toe with Duke to possibly advance in March Madness. So I believe that you can play a tough non-conference to mold your team, but then again, there are some squads like Baylor that kind of petered out over the course of the year. You're looking at a hard non-conference, Gonzaga and Auburn. Can you build up to it? And then you just never did. You were too young to figure it out, and you beat yourself down so early that it did not work out. So it's kind of twofold to look at how you schedule games across the Big 12 when we talk non-conference. When we talk in-conference, BYU could have a generational team, still go 11-7 in Big 12 play, still go 10-8, and be one of the most elite schools in all of college basketball. Is that ultimately good or bad?
For BYU fans' expectations, it's going to be bad, because this is a school and a program. What Kevin Young has done has been absolutely remarkable. Considering, remember when Mark Pope left BYU, there were so many people out there said, well, that was a decent finish for BYU in the Big 12, but now they're going to have to completely rebuild from the ground up. Yeah. Kevin Young comes in, compiles an incredible staff, and most particularly a really, really good roster, and then leads them to a Sweet 16, the place they hadn't been since Jimmer Fredette was prowling the court for BYU. So what he has accomplished in a very short time, Drake, is remarkable, but to match, I think, what the expectation level is for BYU fans with this squad, and the fact that the roster is still not even completely filled out, BYU is going to have to probably go, 14-4, 15-3, and be right there, first or second place in the Big 12 conference, I think, really to make BYU fans feel like they've accomplished what they should accomplish. Yeah,
if you do that, you're a 1 seed. You've locked in the 1 seed. I think you could finish 14-4 in the Big 12, or even 13-5, and still be teetering the 1 seed line if you only got 6 losses and the resume that BYU should carry in that case. Jake, I think of Cincinnati, Kansas State, UCF as kind of a must-win to save your head coach, or must-win to save the longevity of your program. Do you think those are the schools that are most desperate to win in 2025?
I would say Kansas State most of all, because considering the NIL money that they have poured into that program, if they don't win at a high level, yeah, goodbye. You're going to blow it up and start over. Now, UCF with Johnny Dawkins, it feels like it's teetering a little bit there. Cincinnati, same thing with Wes Miller. I feel like they may, if they had an awful season, they may decide to go a different direction. But in particular, Kansas State, it's win now or else. And that's a tough scenario to be in because they've tried to buy their way to the top and it has not worked to this point. And they're going to pour more money into it. And at some point, those boosters are going to get fed up and say, you know what, we're yanking the cord.
Yeah, hard not to consider Arizona State to be in that category, but kind of the reason I don't is they're past dead. Like they have just accepted their fate.
Go and watch Richie Bradshaw at Locked On Sun Devils. He'll explain everything for you. For whatever reason, Arizona State just thinks, okay, we're just going to roll the ball out there and let it do what it's going to do because they simply put, they don't care about basketball apparently.
No, they don't. And now that football is good, it's only buried basketball further, which I guess if that's what works, become a football school and that will never hurt you. It keeps the lights on at the swimming complex. Coming up, the faith that BYU claims they're pretty good at upholding, but is NIL antithetical to that? This is it's a heavy question. Locked on Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? So I don't have to move my console from room to room. I can just play Call of Duty or EA Sports College Football in any room with the Amazon Fire TV. It is the latest technology for elevated playing with Wi-Fi 6 and 6E, auto low latency mode, advanced technology. Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. It's also affordable and, like I said, portal. Bring it to the airport. Take it to your hotel. This is where our hosts across the company with hardcore gaming experience have all agreed the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K is a game changer. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd gen. It's Fire TV. Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. Here's where things have been so interesting in the BYU NIL conversation. There is a very clear, explicit relationship between BYU and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And there have been dissenters from Utah fans to even those in the church who have kind of danced around this a little bit publicly, talking about how BYU spending millions of dollars in NIL, outbidding universities, picking up players, might be working antithetical to their, this is appropriate on second reference, LDS affiliation. With that being said, as someone who has represented the BYU fan base for a long time and understands this dynamic, when you hear that, what is the appropriate response? How do you respond?
I chuckle because here's the deal, Drake. BYU is obviously sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it is its own entity. And moreover, here's the deal. There are boosters out there, and yes, BYU's got a lot of them who've got very deep pockets. They have gone out and made a lot of money, and the vast majority of them are faithful members of the LDS faith, and they contribute 10% of their income to tithing if they're faithful adherents to the faith. That's just it's part of being a member of the church. I love people out there who like to spend other people's money or tell them how to spend said money. I'm not going to tell Ryan Smith or any one of these other big BYU boosters how to spend their millions, if not billions of dollars. And if they want to spend tens of millions on BYU sports, good on you. A lot of them have deep ties to Provo and deep ties to BYU, and they want nothing more than to watch BYU succeed at a high level. And if that's the way that they can contribute to it by putting a lot of money into the pot, go for it. I'm all for it because, as I like to say, more money means more good, it means more business for me and my podcast.
I think there are fan bases, maybe a Cincinnati fan, a UCF fan, who see this online chatter, who see the rhetoric and get confused. We're like, yeah, man, BYU has this honor code, but now they're paying millions of dollars at NIL. They're pretending because of something that was misconstrued by a Utah fan or someone who is uneducated. They're pretending that BYU's connection to faith means that the limitations extend to NIL for some reason. And it's like, I don't get it. You could ask 50%, I believe this is a true number, of Big 12 fans. Can BYU fans have caffeine? They would say no. Can they sell it at the stadium? No. Can they watch TV or movies? No, right? There's so many common misconceptions about the LDS faith that Big 12 fans have had to learn. And I get it. You're from Groesbeck, Texas. Yes. You grew up rooting for Texas Tech. I understand where that guy's coming from. All he knows about BYU, he probably read on Twitter. This feels like just another broad, common misconception.
Yeah, I agree. We're not Liberty. Let's put it that way. Liberty and the evangelicals, they got a whole different list of rules than BYU has. Yes, BYU has pretty stringent rules. Essentially, it's no premarital sex, no alcohol, don't do drugs, and essentially live a clean, chaste life. That's what the BYU Honor Code is here for, Drake. But guess what? They sell caffeine on campus, everybody. There's fully leaded Cokes, Dr. Peppers, whatever you want to drink. It's there on campus. You're right. There is a lot of misconceptions out there because a lot of people, the LDS community and the LDS population it's like a footnote in the overall U.S. community. There's roughly 6 to 7 million members in the United States, which has 330 million people in it. So there are a lot of people out there that have probably never met a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yes, they're seeing the online rhetoric between BYU and Utah fans. And yes, they're getting it misconstrued as to what BYU requires of its students, its athletes, and even members of the LDS faith as well. So I completely understand the misconceptions and feeling like, hey, I'm confused on why BYU is doing this when we're hearing that it's going like this on the other side. Simply put, BYU's in it to win it. And if it requires funding some money, they have boosters who are willing to foot the bill. And at the same time, BYU will hold to its mission, and that is to educate the next generation of students and keep them as faithful as they can when it comes to LDS faith.
My question is, the Big 12 has a lot of schools in the Bible Belt. The Big 12 has a lot of fan bases that subscribe to some sort of faith here. If you're a Baylor or even a school like Texas Tech, like UCF, and you're, for whatever reason, your university took clean, normal money, just like, here is $10 million for NIL, and for whatever reason, you're like, yep, we love God, so you keep that money of yours, or if it's something as nominal as like, well, we feel like we would feel guilty if we took your money and put it toward our athletics. That's what a UCF would say. That's the equivalent in my brain. This just seems, if you boil it down to that, silly to me.
It is silly. Here's the deal. A lot of fan bases, one in particular that's 40 miles north of Provo, speaking of Utah, they're upset that their donor base is not funding Utah athletics to the level that BYU has its donor base funding it. And the fact that BYU's having success, and they've stolen a couple of players from Utah in their eyes over the past recruiting cycle, Keanu Tanavasa, Carson Ryan, the two names that they like to shove in BYU fans' faces. They went to war for Oklahoma State when it came to the Justin Kirkland deal, even though Oklahoma State fans and our good friend Cody Stovall were like, dude, it's part of everyday life in this new world of college sports. It's jealousy. And here's the other thing about this. The LDS Church was cast out of multiple communities when it was first founded way back in the 1800s. And there is a generational persecution complex that still is ingrained in this church, Drake. And I'm a member of the faith, so I'll speak on this a little bit more authoritatively than I think a lot of people can. When you attack people of the LDS faith, they are really like, hey, back off. And to BYU's credit, I think the people who actually matter, I'm talking about administrators, coaches, university personnel, they have just sat back and said, you know what, say what you're going to say. We're going to do our thing over here, and we're going to keep winning along the way. You can shout to the rooftops on social media all you want, but we'll just do our thing. And so long as we're not running afoul of our own internal rules, whether they are what you think they are on the outside or not, BYU is going to just continue to operate the way it operates. And so far, it appears it's pretty successful.
I'm glad you brought that up. And talking about being a member of the church, this is a hard question, and I'm kind of putting you in a tough spot to answer it. To me, as someone of faith, I've always viewed, like I went to Baylor Baptist School, I've always viewed the better Baylor is, the more people understand, hey, the largest Baptist university in the world is at the forefront of college athletics. That is spreading a mission that goes further than I like to see my team do good. This is a university carrying a mission afar. So when people donate money, now the LDS faith, their community, is not putting any church money into BYU athletics or into NIL. That is not happening. Let's be very clear here. Though, to me, athletics, your university brand, can be a mission field. It can be an opportunity to spread the word of something you care about or your faith. Do BYU donors, by and large, see donations to athletics as that kind of billboard?
At some level, I think they do. Here's the deal. I've talked with enough former BYU athletic directors in my radio career who are still around, who say that when BYU won the national championship in 1984, there is direct correlation when BYU has success in athletics that the LDS Church has more success in its missionary efforts. They've got 70,000+ missionaries worldwide, over 400 different missions, Drake, literally around this globe that are trying to spread the faith. And yes, some of them may not register in far-flung places like Africa, but here stateside, when BYU has success in athletics, there are more people who are going to sit up, and when those two young men or two young women show up at your doorstep and say, hey, we'd like to talk to you about the LDS Church, they're going to be more inclined to say, okay, I want to know more about what BYU is and what the faith that sponsors it is all about. That is what I think some of these boosters look at it as, is yes, it's another opportunity to spread the gospel far and wide, albeit via a different medium than just being simply put missionary work.
No doubt. These conversations always get really fun. It's just, to me, I understand someone out there's probably going, oh, this podcast turned religious. To me, it's so much more informational for a lot of people who don't know to now finally understand.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I like about this, you mentioned the fact we got a lot of schools in this conference that are in the Bible Belt, Drake. We have TCU, Texas Christian University. We got Baylor, which is Baptist affiliated. You've had conversations, I know, recently about maybe adding SMU, Southern Methodist University, to this league. There are church-affiliated schools around this country, and I think every one of them, if you're a big fan of that school, you understand what the connection between sports and faith are for those universities. Just so happens that BYU is that for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yes, its arch rival is just miles up the road. And these two fan bases, they knock heads literally every single day. My best friend in grade school, Drake, was a dyed-in-the-wool Utah fan. To this day, he bleeds red and loves his Utes. I was a Cougar growing up. We bickered like brothers over the Utes and Cougars. We were still the best of friends. That is a dynamic you don't find anywhere else other than Utah, it feels like.
That's great. Jake, for listeners across the network and of other Big 12 schools who want to find more of your work or more consistent stuff, I know you not only cover BYU, but you do cover BYU's existence in the greater whole of the conference. Where can they go to find your work?
Yeah, check out Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcasts, also on YouTube as well. If you want to interact social media-wise, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Locked On Cougars. And if you want my thoughts on all things sports, just beyond BYU, I talk a lot of BYU, but I do everything else. Search me out, Jacob C. Hatch, on X or Twitter.
That's Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Cougars and Dose Grande.